It was the Christmas season in the late 80s, and there was a TV commercial advertising the movie premiere of Gremlins, which was going to be broadcast on Christmas Eve for the very first time. So excited children and their parents can watch this festive classic and have a truly great, wonderful family experience, which no doubt will then precede the joyful events of Christmas Day.
They'll march their way right into your heart.
My sisters and I saw this TV advert for this fun Gremlins movie and really wanted to see it. After all, the trailer made it look like a fun, cute, E.T.-style heartwarming movie, where just like E.T., a young guy befriends an adorable creature. Seriously, me and my sisters and my parents thought that this was another magical E.T. kind of movie. There was one problem though. That night that Gremlins was being broadcast, our family was going to a family Christmas event party. But that needn't be a problem. As my parents pointed out, we had one of those state-of-the-art video cassette recorder thingies. So we could go to the Christmas party and the video recorder can work its magic and record Gremlins for us.
Max, my VHS home video recorder is taping it on one cassette. Wow.
All on this blank cassette tape, so we can watch Gremlins at our own leisure and comfort. Which is even better, as now not only do we get to watch Gremlins, but we also get to keep it. So that night after the Christmas party was over, and us kids were pretty tired and went straight to bed, no doubt looking forward to unwrapping presents the next morning. Now, my parents thought to themselves, why don't we watch this Gremlins movie that we just recorded while the kids are asleep? After all, Gremlins is meant to be this great and wonderful movie. So my parents watched the videotape recording of Gremlins, and sure enough, it started just like a cute E.T. movie. But then this happened. And this. Oh dear. My parents were both shocked and horrified. We can't let our kids watch this. This is horrific. They thought they were getting E.T., but to them, this was more like Texas Chainsaw Massacre. In fact, this scene in particular shocked and horrified my parents so much, they instantly stopped the videotape and recorded over it with whatever just so happened to be on TV at that time, which I think was the British police drama, The Bill. And so the very next day, Christmas morning, me and my sisters woke up before my parents and we went downstairs to put on this Gremlins tape so we can finally watch the movie. And we were absolutely loving it. We then get to the kitchen scene and then the picture suddenly changes to the Bill. Why? Why am I now watching the Bill? So instead of watching a movie about Billy Peltzer going on an adventure to stop gremlin monsters, I was instead watching Cockney police officers walking around London saying, "Rightio then sunshine, you're nicked." Needless to say, us kids were truly disappointed. Maybe even a little bit heartbroken too. And I just couldn't figure out why not only weren't we allowed to watch Gremlins, but our parents actively went out of their way to stop us watching it. And my situation wasn't unique. It was a small part of a bigger issue, which is that many parents at that time had real big issues with the movie Gremlins, as well as other similar movies that came out round about that time, of which would lead to the creation of the PG-13 rating. Yes indeed folks, cinema was changing. So I guess it's fitting that I should be hanging out with some Spielbergian creatures as we explore the story of the PG-13 rating. So, let's check it out. The PG-13 rating starts with the big guy himself, the man who may just be the greatest filmmaker of all time, Steven Spielberg. Despite in the late 70s and early 80s, Spielberg was on top of his game, really, he was getting away with murder. Cinematically, of course, where many of his popular and successful movies all had scenes that were pushing boundaries in terms of gore, intensity, and violence. And yet somehow his movies were getting PG ratings, meaning they were in a category of family-friendly entertainment. Really, the genesis of the PG-13 rating started 9 years before the rating was created, in 1975 with Jaws, the ultimate shark monster movie. As brilliant as Jaws is, I mean, come on, it's one of the greatest movies of all time, it was pretty intense and gruesome, not shying away from showing blood, as well as horrific imagery of dead corpses with missing eye, limbs being bitten off, a kid being brutally killed, and a graphic scene of one of the movie's main characters literally being eaten alive. Naturally, the Motion Picture Association of America, otherwise known as the MPAA, gave Jaws an R rating, but Spielberg wasn't content with an R rating. And it would make sense that he would want to strive for a PG rating, as it means that more people would be going to see the movie, particularly, as mentioned, families. So after telling the MPAA that that's one bad hat, Harry, some trims and cuts were made. Well, lo and behold, the unthinkable happened. Jaws, a movie which technically has more blood than Carrie and The Exorcist, was given a PG rating. However, the movie's poster had to feature a disclaimer that said, quote, "May be too intense for younger children." Now, I read in an article a few years ago that Spielberg got Jaws a PG rating thanks to a technicality, as back then the MPAA's biggest fears were children watching violent movies and copying the violence. But Spielberg insisted that children aren't going to start swimming in the sea and eating people, or something to that effect. I couldn't find this article, so take that information with a pinch of salt.
I wonder if it was the fact that Spielberg got away with a PG rating for Jaws, if that further enticed him to explore pushing the boundaries of PG acceptability, or what can and can't be shown in family entertainment, as would be the case with his following movies.
Jaws. Maybe too intense for younger children.
Then we jump to 1981, when Spielberg directed the ultimate swashbuckling adventure movie Raiders of the Lost Ark. Now, like Jaws, Raiders of the Lost Ark didn't shy away from blood and violence, and had no problem seeing characters getting shot and killed. However, one scene that really stood out and left many people shocked was the infamous melting Nazis scene, an out-of-place scene that really features horrific visuals. Funny enough, the visual that the MPAA really had a problem with here was the exploding head of the Belloc character, to which the solution to that worry was to just add fire to that scene, I guess to try and somewhat blanket the visual. And hey presto, just like Jaws, Raiders of the Lost Ark was given a PG rating. I think there was also something of a feeling that most of the violence we see inflicted in Raiders of the Lost Ark happens to Nazis, and, well, they basically deserve it anyway. The following year, things went up a notch with the haunted house movie Poltergeist, in which Spielberg produced and may or may not have co-directed. The movie was marketed as a fun family ghost movie, but within the movie itself, there are many horrific and terrifying scenes, including a swimming pool full of rotten corpses, a scene where a character is being assaulted on a bed by an unseen entity, but the most memorable shocking scene involved a character literally ripping their face off. Yeah, that's right, kiddies, enjoy your family entertainment. By the way, those hands belong to Spielberg himself, which I find to be symbolic, as it was like at his hands he was the puppet master, creating this new family-friendly movie intensity. Now, just like Jaws, Poltergeist did originally receive an R rating, but both Spielberg and director / possible co-director Tobe Hooper appealed this, and lo and behold, once again, the PG gods must have been smiling down on Spielberg, as Poltergeist, a film which without a doubt should have been given an R rating, was given a PG rating. And thus, many kids in the summer of 1982 not only got to be enchanted by Spielberg's other fantasy, E.T., but also be traumatized by the horrors of Poltergeist.
But you know, even E.T., which was considered a wholesome modern family fairy tale, had some pretty edgy moments in it which, let's just say, you wouldn't have gotten in your average Disney movie at that time.
It was nothing like that,
Elliot! Sit down.
But let's face it, kids loved these movies, and I think Spielberg knew that. I think he was trying to channel a new and edgy style of filmmaking, one that was reaching out to and appealing to the 13-year-old audiences. Now, it seems that Poltergeist would be quite instrumental when it comes to building the bridges to the PG-13 rating, as someone called Chris reached out and left a comment on my Facebook page saying that the PG-13 rating would actually be created thanks to Poltergeist, as the movie studio MGM, who were distributing Poltergeist, had to help Spielberg in order to fight to get Poltergeist a PG rating, as according to Chris, the desired PG rating got rejected twice, with 24 board members voting for the movie to have an R rating. This was an issue for MGM, as Poltergeist was the studio's big movie of 1982, and felt that the movie would need to be rated PG in order to reach its full box office potential. After many important people appealing the case, Poltergeist was finally given a PG rating, and Chris added that at that moment, Spielberg and Rating and Classifications of American Pictures Association chairman Richard Hefner and the MPAA's founder Jack Valenti knew that a middle ground rating would need to be created, one to sit in between PG and R. So there can be movies aimed at kids or families, but also have the freedom to be a little edgy and to go into more mature areas. Basically, something that could be a middle ground between The Never-Ending Story and A Nightmare on Elm Street. The funny thing is, Poltergeist did have a scene cut, but it was when a character said they hate Pizza Hut, which is why we get this weird jump cut.
And you're getting pulled along in the...
Hi, Ben.
So scaring the bejesus out of kids with gore is okay, but say anything bad about Pizza Hut and well, that's just going too far. It's here we get to the chaos of 1984. And oh boy, this is the moment where it was decided that a change in the rating system had to be made, thanks to the public outcry caused by two Spielberg-related movies, which included the Spielberg-directed Indiana Jones and the Temple of Doom and the Spielberg-produced Gremlins, two movies that came out that year and were rated PG and came under heavy criticism thanks to their use of violence and gore. To Spielberg, this was probably just another day in the office, as at that stage a lot of his movies had scrutiny made over their PG ratings, but now the public was starting to get involved. Indiana Jones and the Temple of Doom was released in May 1984, and just as with Raiders of the Lost Ark, many parents took their small children to see the movie, but were shocked and appalled thanks to its violence, themes of child slavery, evil cults, and a sacrifice scene involving a character's heart literally being ripped out of their chest. All while the movie went under the guise of a PG movie. There were many public outcries from parents and parent groups who felt the movie was too horrific and nasty to be considered a PG children's movie. Spielberg himself retaliated to this by saying, quote, "The picture is not called Indiana Jones and the Temple of Roses, it's Indiana Jones and the Temple of Doom." Based. And further defended the movie's violence by saying the movie is a fantasy which uses violence which can't be replicated in the real world. Now the chaos wasn't over yet, as just 2 weeks after the release of Indiana Jones and the Temple of Doom, Gremlins then also came out, which, as mentioned, many people felt was going to be a cute E.T. style movie. After all, both Gremlins and E.T. had Spielberg at the helm. But oh boy, although people felt they were getting a fun, kid-friendly adventure, many parents were once again shocked with the level of gore and violence seen in the movie, with it being felt that Gremlins isn't so much a fun E.T. movie, but a straight-up horror film. Many parents who took their kids to see Gremlins would even walk out of the theatre before the movie was finished, and felt that they were misled by the movie's advertisement marketing, in which the Christmas movie element was heavily used in the marketing, making it look more like a wholesome Christmas movie. Also keep in mind, the gremlin creatures weren't shown in any trailers or marketing, as not to spoil the surprise. So I would imagine that to finally see them in all their glory for the first time would have been a shock to parents. Film critic Leonard Maltin famously was not impressed and called Gremlins icky and gross. Now keep in mind that the original script of Gremlins was a straight up horror movie, which even had a scene where the Gremlins decapitated Billy Peltzer's mum, till Spielberg came along and wanted to take it into more of a family movie direction. But yeah, Gremlins really did stir the pot in the name of good taste when it comes to family movies. It'll actually be interesting to speak to one of these outraged parents of that time, even if they're not American, to try and grasp exactly what their problem was. And what was it exactly that really upset these parents? Yeah, hi Mum, it's me. Do you remember when you stopped us kids from watching Gremlins and kind of taped over the tape halfway through? Now, why was that? You know, what was all that about?
In the beginning, they were nice, cuddly little teddy bear sort of things, but then they turned into monsters. And I didn't want my young children seeing monsters.
Did you think it was too violent or too disgusting, or was it just...
Yeah, too horrific for young children.
Right, but what about now? Do you reckon it's improved now or gotten better now?
Do you know, if you're talking about Gremlins, I have never actually seen the whole film, Mark. It's not my type of film.
So there you have it. If my mum is anything to go by, I think what really disturbed her the most was the fact that these creatures did start cute and cuddly, and that the main shock and outrage was something that looks so cute and cuddly can mutate into a hideous monster. It seems that she just could not get over that. And so, as a kid, I wasn't allowed to watch it. Just look at me here with my fluffy hair and chubby cheeks. But is it just me, or when I was a toddler, did I look like someone's grandma who's going to bake some cookies in order to cheer someone up while they talk to me about their divorce? But all the outraged parents aside, I think that Spielberg's work was appealing to the young child audiences. Even if their parents weren't on board, the kids sure were. Also going back to that childhood recording, when Gremlins stopped thanks to being taped over by the bill, I can remember this recording featured a scene of a burglar who wore a balaclava who burgled a family home at nighttime, and even stole the Christmas presents under the family Christmas tree. To me, this scene was way more terrifying than anything in Gremlins. I think even though I was a very young child, I still had the common sense to know that the monsters in Gremlins aren't real. But a nasty man breaking into a family home at night when the family is sleeping is very real, and something that could happen within the realm of the real world. So I think there's an irony that Gremlins was taped over with something else as not to scare us kids, but what it was taped over with was way scarier than anything in Gremlins. Isn't it funny how the universe works sometimes? Regardless, getting back on the topic, despite the controversies, both Indiana Jones and the Temple of Doom and Gremlins were still very successful movies, and both these movies are often used as templates that caused the creation of the PG-13 rating, as after the panic and backlash caused by both movies, Spielberg finally took his concerns to the MPAA and really put in an argument to create a new rating, so there could now be movies aimed at 13-year-olds that could be edgier than your standard PG, without going into full-blown R-rated territory. And so just 2 months after the release of Gremlins, the brand new PG-13 rating was created. So this leads to the big question. What was the first PG-13 movie? Well, even that's not so straightforward, as some claim it's the teen war drama movie Red Dawn, whereas others claim it's the coming-of-age comedy The Flamingo Kid. Okay, so here's what happened. The Flamingo Kid was the first movie to be given the PG-13 rating, but the first movie to be released with the rating was Red Dawn. Wolverines! So there was now a new rating classification in town, where younger viewers could now be subjected to edgier content, like the as-mentioned Red Dawn, which literally starts with an invading army shooting up a high school, where we see school kids having to fight in a war, in a movie which at the time was criticised as being the most violent movie of all time. No joke, that happened. Then there was Dreamscape, a science fiction horror movie which featured horrific dream murder sequences that'll even given Nightmare on Elm Street a run for its money. The Woman in Red, a raunchy comedy which featured nudity. The Gate, a horror movie where a young Stephen Dorff gets terrorised by many horrific and disturbing demons. Indeed, kids, enjoy those nightmares. Yep, suddenly younger audiences could enjoy more mature and intense movies, which would follow with the likes of Enemy Mine, Mad Max Beyond Thunderdome, European Vacation, Weird Science, Crocodile Dundee, The Wraith, Big Trouble in Little China, and Look Who's Talking, with everything coming full circle with Spielberg's dinosaur monster movie Jurassic Park, along with many, many more. But what about the rules of PG-13 movies? Well, like the Gremlins themselves, a PG-13 picture has to have a set of guidelines to qualify for the rating.
You know, there's some things I forgot to tell you guys, and they're really important.
These include intense violence being allowed, but if the movie shows gore, then it must be very brief. Now, you can see blood, as long as it's not too much in your face. You know, just the odd splashings of blood. Sex scenes are okay, but must be brief. Nudity is also okay, as long as the nude scene doesn't contain any intimacy. Assaults of a sexual nature must not be shown in any way, shape or form, but they can be implied or talked about. And you can use the F-bomb, but this is important. You can only use it once. Unless the movie is Adventures in Babysitting, which somehow got away with 2 F-bombs.
Don't with the babysitter.
And the F-word in a PG-13 cannot be used in a sexual nature.
You know you got a big space in between your teeth?
You know you have a big f***ing nose?
So, just like the Mogwai, no getting it wet. This is why certain edits had to be made to the movie Crocodile Dundee. In the Australian version of the movie, the F-word was used.
Are you gonna talk all night, my man? Are you gonna one of them?
But despite the movie being rated PG-13 and having one F-word quota that it was allowed to use, the F-bomb still had to be cut in the American version as it was used in a sexual nature, where the dialogue was awkwardly re-edited.
Are you gonna talk all night, my man? Are you gonna screw one of them?
Which to me kind of robs the scene of its true comedic value.
These days, PG-13 kind of has the stigma of being a safer version of its former glory. Many people feel that the rating has become sterile and too safe and too watered down, that this classification that was once edgy has now become too tame and generic and mainstream, as opposed to its former rebellious self. So the question is, why has there in later years been this persistent shift with PG-13? Well, in the following years since its creation, PG-13 would come under fire several times. An example of that was Batman Returns, in which, despite being PG-13, many parent groups felt that the movie was too violent and too disturbing and gross, and should in no way be promoted as a kids' movie.
Some parents contend that Batman Returns, which is rated PG-13, is actually being marketed for younger children, and the movie is just too violent.
It was very violent. It was a total attack against kids.
Almost calling for a sort of ban or boycott, all in the name of morals and decency. And what really brought the issue to boiling point was McDonald's pulling out of its promotional tie-in with Batman Returns after being appalled with the movie, particularly a scene of the Penguin puking up green slime. I mean, after all, what kid is going to want to go to McDonald's and get burgers after seeing that? The Batman Returns controversy of 1992 was almost 1984 all over again, as in the year 1984, not the book 1984. Although that probably could also apply here. Remember me saying how the universe works in mysterious ways sometimes? There are also several other claims that something that led to the watering down of the PG-13 rating was the Super Bowl halftime incident involving Justin Timberlake and Janet Jackson, in which in 2004 during a halftime performance, everyone was watching a musical performance by Timberlake and Jackson, where Timberlake tore at Jackson's outfit, revealing her boob to the world, and thus the term wardrobe malfunction was created. The incident led to a sudden panic in how media is monitored, which in turn caused a huge censorship in all facets of media, which led to re-evaluating entertainment content as well as updating policies and standards. And if these claims are true, and that this incident did affect the PG-13 rating, then it's interesting that it happened in 2004, 20 years after the rating's creation. And that it took a filmmaker with a tiresome dedication to upgrade family entertainment to create it, and all it took to take it down was a wardrobe malfunction. To conclude, I actually don't think the PG-13 rating got watered down too much. I mean, movies that came out since that incident, like the Dark Knight trilogy, the later Harry Potter movies, and the Pirates of the Caribbean films, definitely did fit the PG-13 mold. Heck, just look at how horrific Revenge of the Sith got. And even more recent movies like Spider-Man No Way Home and Top Gun Maverick do still have violent scenes, but don't go too overboard with it requiring an R rating. Once again, fitting the PG-13 guidelines of 1984. I think the biggest problem is a frustration of movies that should be rated R being given PG-13 ratings in order to try and get more movie audiences in theatres and thus increase box office returns. So this is why we constantly hear groans these days when an upcoming movie, usually one that's based on an R-rated property or franchise or genre, is being given a PG-13 rating. But that's not really a problem with the PG-13 code, but more misuse of products that should be rated R. Now, this desire of keeping R-rated franchises in safe PG-13 spaces could very well have been a retaliation to the Super Bowl incident, sure. Maybe, possibly, could very well be the case. But I also do think that things are changing and that studios are now having more faith in the R rating, as we are seeing an increase in ambitious R-rated movies that probably a few years earlier would have been PG-13. Regardless, PG-13 is an important legacy in the history of cinema. It showed us that kids' movies or family entertainment could now be a little bit more ambitious, and that it was the right time to push boundaries and to add a little edge. I think growing up as a child in the 80s and 90s, I grew up in the heyday of this new movement, and really got the best of it, as not only was this a rating system to spice up the content, but to also find a new and alluring middle ground. And sometimes new ideas have to be made in order to move forward. Some people have even said to me, you know, should you be talking about PG-13 movies? After all, you are Australian, do you have the right to do this? And yes, I think it is an important issue that all lovers of cinema should have the right to explore, as it is an important chapter in the history of cinema, as this new rating system would change the direction that movies would go in. Aww. An effect that's still in motion even to this day. After all, movies as they are released here are really a reflection of what's going on in America and how they are released in America, as the movie industry is mainly an American industry. Anyway, I'm Minty, and Merry Christmas everyone. I hope you all have a happy and safe day. As for me, well, I'm gonna watch Gremlins. After all, I don't need any parental supervision. See ya!